And I believe we are live. So
we are live.
Hello, everyone. If someone could chat, just say hi, everyone, and then at least we know you can hear us. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Imogen. Hello, Jordan. I adore so many names. Hello, all you lovely people, and
Brilliant.
welcome.
That's great that you can hear us. We're just gonna check. Good, there we are. Lots of people connecting in. We'll probably just wait for people to connect in. See, there was quite a few people in the waiting room.
Yes.
So, and there's Gary. Great.
And I'm here. Yes.
Our second
Hello, Gary.
So that's great.
Hello.
It's great. If you're not speaking, I wonder if you could keep your camera switched off until you're called to speak, because then that makes it a little bit easier for everybody to see the screens.
Yeah.
So if anybody's not speaking, if they could switch their camera off and put themselves on mute as they come in, and then that way we'll just be able to see who's talking.
Yeah.
Okay. Just adjust my light slightly.
So we'll just give it a second. And we'll just have a little look at what we're doing.
Well, there were 123 people in the waiting room. We've got 104 on the list so far. So we've got a few more to pop in, and then we'll get going.
That's lots of people.
Yeah, not a bad turnout for a Thursday lunchtime.
Indeed.
Yeah, a lunchtime launch.
Lunch. Absolutely. So, Catherine, people seem to be on stage, so I'm not quite sure.
I'm not sure how we do that.
How we get people on or off stage.
Maybe I can.
So if you're on stage, just keep camera and mic off, and then we'll talk to people later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Not quite sure what's happened with the settings, but people seem to be coming on stage. So sorry, I don't want to click X because it might.
No, that would chuck you out. But I think we'll have to work with it as it is.
Yes.
That's fine. Yes.
And you can see us, so that's good.
Yes.
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with Livestorm, so I don't know how it works in terms of being able to pin people and expand them.
But anyway, we don't want to keep you longer than 30 minutes, so we'll kick off. And if I can introduce Deborah, Communications Officer of ARA.
Hi, I'm Deborah Mason. I'm the Communications Manager at the Archives and Records Association. And just want to say thank you very much for coming to this sector launch for the Campaign for Records. Gary and Ren and various other people in ARA and IRMS have been working on this for a good long few months and bringing it all together. But we thought now is the moment to ask for further participation from the sector and to open it out. So to begin with, Gary is going to give a bit of the sort of rationale behind it, the overarching theme, and Ren will go into a bit more of the details. So I'm going to hand over to Gary. Perhaps you'd introduce yourself, Gary, and then you'll get your titles and places right.
Yeah, okay, right. My name's Gary Tewson. My day job is I'm the County Archivist of Norfolk, and currently I've just stepped down to Vice Chair of the Chief Archivist and Local Government Group of ARA. I'll launch straight into it, really. I mean, we're keen to keep the talk brief because we want discussion at the end, but we'll see how we get on. Right. Well, it's great to see loads of people here. We've got well over 100, which is excellent. So that's really good for us launching our campaign for records to our sector. Now, I'm assuming that most people here would call themselves informational record professionals. I think we all know that the work we do is important, that it really counts. But I think sometimes we don't realise just how important it actually is, and we underestimate the impact we have. And a consequence of that is that we might sometimes fail to communicate as effectively as we might. So basically, I'm going to start out really high, but what I think is on fairly solid ground. So I think it's safe to say that everyone in this virtual room believes that democracy is a good thing. I'm sure you're all nodding your heads. And this is generally true for everyone sits in the Overton window of acceptable political discourse. I think that it's true for so many people. Anybody within a mainstream political party, that's true of. So the point I'm trying to make is I think what we're talking about here is a non-contentious, non-party political issue. But that Overton window of acceptable discourse moves about and it stretches over time. And I think there's some really alarming signs out there that is moving in the wrong direction. And there's a growing awareness and concern about this. So first of all, I'm going to use a quote from a senior member of Parliament. You can ask me who it was later, but it's not somebody who I don't think I've ever quoted from a speech they've made before. Democracy is not something we can take for granted. There is a growing concern about democratic backsliding in countries right around the world. Wherever you are, whatever your political context, democracy is something that requires nurturing at all times. Now, I could quote lots of statistics to back that up. And if you look at our campaign website, there is a link to some OECD information on it. But for now, I'm just going to give one, which I think is particularly alarming. So this is from the Cambridge University Centre for the Future of Democracy. They founded in the UK, when members of Generation X, that great generation, which I'm part of, turned 30, about 38% of them said they felt dissatisfied with democracy. Admittedly, that's not great, but, it's still a large majority. However, in the last decade, they asked millennials who were turning 30 the same question. And the result is over half, 52%, responded that they're not satisfied with democracy. Now, personally, I find this sort of generational wave of dissatisfaction with something so fundamental to our society extremely concerning. So, of course, there are many factors in this growing dissatisfaction and this lack of trust in democratic institutions. So I'm going to slip in another quote now because I like this one. It's it's an American journalist born in the 19th century, but he said it a long time ago, but it's quite a famous quote, and I think it's equally valid today. And that's, "I'm tired of hearing that democracy doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. We are supposed to work it." So I think this campaign is very much about how we as records professionals contribute to that agenda of making, as John Dewey called it, democracy becomes the blood and bone of people in their daily conduct of life. Now, in the UK, democracy comes in many shapes and forms. I think, I think of it as two things which overlap. We've got a multi-layered representative democracy, and I think that that's important for this campaign, the word multi-layered, because, it's parliamentary, but it's national, it's regional, it's local, and each of those bodies of government has got a very important role to play in reinforcing that trust. And we also have an increasingly participatory democracy where individuals are engaging with those organs. Now, for that representative democracy to work, and this is really at the core of our argument, is that government has to have certain qualities. It has to be open, transparent, accessible, accountable, and effective. Without these qualities, that's when trust in all the layers of the government declines and that dissatisfaction grows. And I know and what is fundamental to this transparency, accessibility, accountability, and effectiveness? Well, I think one of the answers is the proper and effective creation, management, retention, and accessibility of records. I'm at the risk of repeating myself. When we look at participatory democracy, where actually failures can have a deeply personal impact on people and actually cause that individual dissatisfaction and lack of trust, the same qualities apply, perhaps even more so. And what's really important for this is if we have the same fundamental qualities where they're supported by the proper creation, management, retention, and accessibility of records. Now, I'm not going to repeat myself again. I haven't used the word trust yet, but I think that's really, really essential part of one of the outcomes which we deliver through proper records management and archive keeping. Now, clearly, there are lots of new challenges out there, and great opportunities as we progress through a new digital age. this opens up a whole load of questions about what we need to do, what is to be done. And yes, clearly, there are regulatory gaps out there, there's confusion, but possibly more significant is just the underinvestment in what we do, and the applying and developing good practice and investing in innovation so that we can really deliver on this very, very important issue. So as information professionals, I think it's really, really important that we effectively communicate why what we do is so very important. And that's why we're meeting here today to launch the campaign for records to our members. So I'm going to hand over to Ren now, and he's going to tell you more about the campaign.
Gary, thank you very much. And of course, I echo and agree with everything that Gary said. So hi, I'm Ren Lemming, and I'm here today in my capacity as chair of the Information and Records Management Society. So fundamentally, with this campaign, we're aiming to achieve two main things. Firstly, and it picks up on one of the last things that Gary was saying, we want to make sure that the various disciplines and professions in our area, archiving, records management, digital preservation and information rights, are recognised, valued and very importantly resourced. Secondly, and equally importantly, we want to ensure that the framework of law and codes of practice as relate to all these disciplines is suitable, effective and also reflective, and this is very important, reflective of modern ways and means of working. So, for example, let's not be afraid to look at where, for example, the Public Records Act could need to be updated to take account of things like WhatsApp, for example. But staying on that theme of law, we must also ensure that appropriate law is actually in place. So, what worries me there? On the 22nd of September, something called the Retained EU Law Revocation and Reform Bill was introduced into Parliament. And what this does is it sets what they call a sunset date of the 31st of December 2023, the end of next year, by which all remaining retained EU law will either be repealed or expressly assimilated into UK domestic law. And there are circumstances when that sunset period might be extended, but as said, at the moment, any of that retained EU law will just go. So what does that mean? So let's have a little think about some of the things that could go. It includes the UK GDPR. It includes PECA, the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations. It includes the Environmental Information Regulations. It includes the Reuse of Public Sector Information Regulations and various other stuff such as the Network and Information Systems Regulations, the Inspire Regulations, the Electronic Identification and Trust Services for Electronic Transactions Regulations. And unless they are replaced or retained, it's worth imagining the consequences of us, UK citizens, our rights to privacy and data protection, our access to public information, as well as potentially compromising the security of networks and other things. So we've got this sunset law in, and then if we focus, for example, on data protection at the moment, where are we with that? The Data Protection and Digital Information Bill was introduced, but then stalled in Parliament on its second reading to allow ministers to consider the legislation further. Then there were the recent messages emanating from the Conservative Party conference, where the Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, announced that the UK would have its own version of GDPR. But we've got this hard stop date where this stuff could just go, and we don't seem to be making any progress on replacing it. Could we be in the situation where for a period of time we have no law whatsoever relating to information rights? So that and all the things arising, for example, from the various public inquiries that are ongoing, or for example, what the Plan 1 for COVID will show us, shows the huge importance of record keeping, but also exposes the stories of where it's gone wrong. So we want to do three things, and I'm just going to end on this. One, we want to publish stories on the website, success stories about the work of the profession, but also warnings about how things have or could go wrong when the profession isn't involved as it should be. That's number one. Secondly, We want to create specific lobbying and advocacy objectives. So one perhaps shaping is to keep eyes and ears on what will happen with data protection legislation in this country. And thirdly, and generally, we want to build this network of politicians, journalists, and other influencers who can hear and support our messages and goals. So I'll end after that with a call to action to both our membership communities who are here, which is publishing stories. Help us write blogs. Think of people who could write blogs, success or war stories. Help us specify the objectives. So if you think there's something concrete that we can use this advocacy campaign to do, please let us know. And then also that list of voice ears, we want to hear our voice. If you can think of anyone who could be an influencer, let us know and we can add them to the list. And I'm going to open this up now to people in the chat. We've got about half the session left. We do have an in-person event. We're going to be launching somewhere on the Westminster Parliament estate in January, where we're going to bring that community in and talk to them about these important matters. So people, anyone got any thoughts? Anyone like to come on stage and say anything or chat through anything or ask anything?
I can see a couple of people typing, so let's
yeah, any ideas or anything at all, most welcome. Because really, you know, we've put some work in to get this up and get the website and get the ball rolling, but between IRMS and ARA together, you know, we've got a very large membership who know a lot of things, and the critical mass we have we need to mobilize, but we can only do that with the participation of our membership. Yeah.
Now, and thank you. Yeah, Deborah's our oracle on the list of influencers. Have we approached the liberty human rights?
I think we have, Sarah. I would have to check the list. I've certainly got quite an extensive list of human rights type organisations to contact. We've been in touch with Open Democracy, have already said that they will support us. We were trying to keep it balanced in the initial phases between the sort of lobbying organisations and those actually in Campaign for Freedom of Information, certainly in that the Good Law Project, who are the people who took Matt Hancock and various parts of the Department of Health to the High Court, I think it was, which produced a judgment which I've subsequently heard refuted by somebody in government on whether digital was covered by the Public Records Act or not. So we've talked to them. We're certainly talking to politicians. Again, Chris Bryant, I've been in touch with chairs of various committees. You'll see on the website that we've got Meg Hillier, who is the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, has written one of the blogs. What we'd really like to do right now is to try and find a Conservative politician to write something. We seem to have quite a lot of lineups for Labour politicians, and certainly obviously the chair of the APPG is a Labour politician. I've just been given the name of, thanks to Angie Sutton-Vane, of Andy Burnham in terms of relating to Hillsborough. So all of these are really great. I'm going to put down the email. What would be great is if people have a contact at those places, if they've already worked with them and have a contact. The trouble is trying to get a contact where it doesn't just go to some info at email makes it harder. So if people have somebody, they don't have to be the chair, they don't have to be the head of, but somebody in those organizations would be really, really good. So and certainly
I'm just going to pick up on a few of the other comments here.
Silip is also already on board with this. So yeah, we're definitely collaborating with them.
The British Computer Society, we probably, because we work with Silip on some other things already. We're working for them, for example, on the workforce mapping survey very closely. But yes, a good call on getting the BCS involved. Michelle, so good friend of the IRMS and FOI campaigner Paul Gibbons. No, but I think we should. I'm not sure we've got Paul on the list, have we?
No, I don't think we are. That would be great to have that if you can make those intros. Rebecca, I can see your comment. Yeah, I've been talking to Angie Sutton-Vane, and I'd be very happy to have a chat with you and other people in the police side of things. You'll see that there's a blog on there already about the police records, but it would be really good to take that further, I think. We haven't spoken to Michelle Donnellan. She was when we were setting this up. She wasn't the culture minister. It was Nadine, and since then they haven't actually sat in Parliament long enough. So one of the reasons we've had to push this back several times, this launch, was that there was so much change going on. This was due to launch in the summer, but obviously with the change of Prime Minister, the change of cabinet, the death of the late Queen, and the fact that then they headed into conference season means that there seemed little point in pushing onto government contacts at that point. Yeah, Meg Hillier, we've already got.
But Michelle Donnellan, I think we certainly could try and speak to, and in fact invite her, in Westminster to our launch event early in January.
Yes.
We've got Catherine from the Campaign for Freedom of Information. Please get in touch with us. Maurice Frankel. Catherine, I don't know if you want a quick chat if I asked you to come on stage.
Yes, that'd be excellent.
Invited you. Conservative Mel Stride, journalist and broadcaster James O'Brien. I mean, thank you. All these,
we've got
great
James
names.
O'Brien on
Yeah,
there.
and there'll be, I mean, there will be a broad sweep of MPs who will be invited to the event.
Yeah, I mean,
and the more we
we'll
get, the
invite
better.
all MPs probably. We'll invite chairs of all the relevant committees. We'll invite MPs who, as you know, people have devolved governments as well. Although, to a certain extent, the main focus is probably on England and Wales, given that Scotland have already done a new Public Records Act, but they're certainly the key people in the devolved governments. Again, if people have specific contacts, if they can send them to me.
I also
we have already contacted.
Yeah, I see somebody by the name of Isabel, who I can probably guess who it is, has talking about collaboration with librarians, and I think that's an important conversation.
Silipper already on board as a supporter. Can we get Catherine?
Catherine, if you want to pop on stage, I've sent an invite that you accept to come on stage. Does anyone else would like to come on stage and say a couple of words? Let me know. Sorry, I'm so many messages coming in. Caroline Lucas, of course, from the Green Party regarding the environmental information regulations. I will say, despite what I included about politics, this is entirely non-political.
Absolutely.
That's why
it's political,
but it's raising what's going on in the current political agenda. And Catherine, hello, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much. Just very briefly, really, we're really interested in supporting the campaign. I can't remember how I picked up about it, but very happy to discuss more if you want to get in touch. And I think we'd be particularly interested in development of your lobbying and advocacy objectives, particularly around gaps in the legislation around the duty to create records and the duty to document.
Because I think that's a big issue, is the fact that I think I used the word capture and create, but it's the failures to create and preserve. And I think with freedom of information, speaking from a multiple local authority experience, there is just a battle to be done to win hearts and minds, and just how important this is. And I think the fact that quite often in local authorities you get people who no, it's freedom of information, that's a lot of work, is symptomatic of the fact that they don't invest in this enough to make their life much easier, and therefore make freedom of information much more powerful, which will in the long term will be very, very good for those local authorities.
Absolutely.
And if we can tie our work into other initiatives that people are doing, even if it's just to act as yet another web platform for it, we're delighted to do that.
Yeah, and of course, if anybody knows somebody personally who is of particular influence, or somebody we can speak to, that's always very, very useful.
Deborah, there's loads more coming in. I guess you're peeling through them all and scribbling the names down. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry,
you're muted, I think, maybe.
Unmuted so we could have Catherine.
So
I'll have to say this, chat. I mean, obviously some of these we've already got, and the Guardian. I've contacted Catherine Viner. I've contacted the Observer. I've also contacted the Telegraph and the Times, who've both done stuff on this. We've also got a contact already at the Independent, but I've also contacted some of the other editors in any case, because this is something that goes across the board in terms of that. So
I guess because when the start of all this really was a few years ago, as Ren and I got together when Boris Johnson announced that there would be an inquiry into COVID in Parliament. And so, we sent in a joint letter, which the Telegraph published, saying, well, if you're going to have a COVID inquiry, what about the records? What about the digital records and preserving those so the COVID inquiry is effective? And there was, an immediate response to that. So I think in lots of ways people get this, and it's a very strong message for us to be pushing. So I think, there's lots of, from the comments in the chat, very clearly people get it. But I would sort of expect lots of people in the room to get this. And our key thing is to get people out there who don't understand the importance of what we do to realise how fundamental what we do is. Yeah,
absolutely. And inquiries, are the times when the lid is lifted. Some of these inquiries, obviously, it's on like contaminated blood and historic abuse. It's going back many years and often looking at paper records. But the COVID inquiry is going to be largely digital, and will be a real litmus test and learn lessons about taking into reforming legislation.
Yeah, I see Michelle's put in, about frequently receiving requests from the Taxpayers Alliance and Big Brother Watch. And I think, it's important for us to bear in mind that there are groups all across the spectrum for whom transparency in government is very, very important, and accountability is very, very important. So the building of that broad alliance is only going to strengthen our campaign.
I'm just keeping half an hour on time because I promised half an hour, and we'll stick to that. So that with the next communications that we'll be issuing to everyone will be about the launch event we're holding in London. Now, obviously, I don't know yet what size the room will be. And obviously what we're trying to do is get politicians and journalists and influencers in there. But of course, any of you, if you work for an organisation, Catherine, like your good self, that's sort of directly involved in that, let us know. And then I think what will happen is we can open a few tickets up, can't we, if there is still space available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Catherine, I don't know if there's any sort of final thoughts from yourself as well as you're with us, or anyone else. Useful story in the Belfast Telegraph.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I mean, I'm putting on
and it's just that sort of thing.
One of the things that we are going to do is, you'll see at the bottom of the front page of the website, there's some links to relevant stories, to blogs and things like that. So if you do have them, do send them through to that. Things like that you've just posted, Craig, send them through to the info at address, and I can then update that website page as we go along and move things into an archive where they've gone past their sell-by date, as it were. So there's a number of things there, which, I mean, as you say, I mean, people have mentioned the Guardian several times, and it's certainly a door that I have repeatedly knocked on, because they have been quite sort of prominent in reporting on these types of things.
And the Post Office Horizon inquiry is another one, and journalists are very keen on that at the moment because that's active and live and interesting things. There's a question from Rebecca, actually.
Yeah, she's interesting.
A specific one. It might be one for Gary to answer.
Thank you. I don't know the answer, actually.
Do we identify them almost before point of creation? Well, particularly if they contain personal data, doing the data protection impact assessment process will help identify records. And this is, that reminds me sort of one final thing. Key to this is let's have some certainty, not just about legislation, but what we are meant to do and not do at the moment. Do we still need DPO?
One of those issues is the sort of overlapping nature of regulation. And, it's bound to happen. And I wouldn't want that to be standing in the way of improvements. I mean, one of the blogs on the website is about the work which was done on police force records, isn't it? And I think, that's one area where clearly, for a long time, there's been an issue about the police not being covered by the Public Records Act. But the work the police, I think I may have dropped out of the meeting there, but the work which is actually being done, there's still a long way to go, but the work being done to improve codes of practice and to regulate their record keeping, is moving in the right direction, and that's exactly the sort of thing we want to encourage.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And what's evolving with police records is certainly something we'll be publishing a lot on the website, isn't it? We've got an article there already. So just one last thing. Yes, Deborah, thanks. You've applied to Andrew.
I know, we can't get into that now, Andrew. We've got 1 minute left, but it's a really good question. So I think, if people have like these big topic things, do send them through, and then I'll make sure that, perhaps we have another meeting like this where we have a bit more time and interested parties can get together and
thanks, Alison, and love to speak to the Federation of Small Business about this.
Yeah. Great. So, given that we are now at 2:01, and we, some of you may not have had your lunches yet. I know I had mine early. I know I can't cope with this sort of thing on an empty stomach. But do keep the conversation going. Obviously, if you've got connections with Gary or Ren, send it direct to them, but or send it to the info@ address. Do follow us on Twitter. We didn't start publicizing that yet, but obviously if all 120 or so people on this call followed us, that would give us a nice starting point for our campaigns to move on with. So do have a look at the website. There's a page there about how you can get involved. There's stuff on there that you can use. You can read the blogs and see whether you know somebody who might be able to put something forward that would kind of add to and complement the work that we're already doing on those blogs.
Brilliant. So, and do we have a LinkedIn page? I don't think we do.
We don't.
We will look at it.
We don't. We can look at that. Yeah, I can certainly set one up when we get to that point.
But there are many means of communication, and if it comes to it, just email one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Just email one of us if you can't find any of the rest of it.
I think we're all Googleable.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm attached to the ARA LinkedIn page, and certainly we could potentially set up a LinkedIn page for this if that was something that people thought was useful.
Splendid. Well,
thanks so much, everyone.
I think that's. I don't know how any of us end this.
Well, we'll just wave goodbye to everyone and wish you a wonderful afternoon. And thank you for all your lovely comments.
Thanks, everybody. Brilliant. Thank you.
Great stuff.